Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 514. I played e4, my opponent played e5, and after knight f3, the normal move attacking the center, my opponent played d6, the Philidor defense. A solid, respectable, but often somewhat cramped defense. After d4, where white just tries to gain space, that's the main move. You can also try bishop to c4 here if you want to, also leading to good play for white. D4, just trying to own the center. The most common move here is actually giving up the center immediately with e takes d4. And white just has a little more space in the center, but black gets all those pieces out. And it's okay, playable for black, slight edge for white. The other way to play it is to try and hold on to the center with knight to d7 or knight to c6. And that's also playable, but once again with a slight edge to white, black is a little bit cramped in those lines. But the one move you probably shouldn't play here is bishop to g4. And I see this surprisingly often. It's funny, you would think that people who know a little bit of their chess history would know better than to play this move, because this move is famous. This was the opening that was used in the game between Paul Morphy and the Count Isouard and the Duke of Brunswick, which was played at the Opera House in Paris. And it's one of the most famous games, probably the most famous game in all of chess history. Paul Morphy goes on to win this game brilliantly. At the end, he sacrifices all of his pieces except for a bishop and a rook. Literally, his only pieces left on the board, not counting pawns, of course, were the bishop and the rook, and he uses the bishop and rook to deliver a checkmate. So, a great game if you've never seen it. And it goes like this. Yeah, this bishop G4 move is already a mistake. It's trying to defend the pawn in the center. The knight and pawn are both attacking e5, and so white is just going to win that pawn. So this pin is trying to stop that, but it doesn't really work because you take the pawn anyway, and if black takes back, then you trade queens and grab the pawn. So you're going to win the pawn in that line. One of the best ways to play if you ever find yourself stuck here by accident is to play this as a gambit with some knight move here. Just develop the knight and give up the d-pawn. You'll get active development for your pieces in compensation for the pawn, but basically you're just a pawn down. This move here keeps the pawn, but it's worse because it gives up the bishop pair and it gives a lot of activity to white. So this is the position reached in the game, Morphy versus the Count and the Duke, and also the position reached in my game. So I follow what Paul Morphy did. I figure what he did is good enough. And in fact, these are the top moves. Early bishop development, but coming with a threat. You're threatening an immediate checkmate on f7, and black has to deal with it. And the developing move knight f6 is pretty natural. That's what the Duke and the Count played. But that's a mistake because it loses material to queen b3. So what's the best reply here? Yeah, some queen move, maybe trying to give up the queen or force a trade of queens and play on from there in a worse position. Anyway, we're still following the game Morphy and the Duke. So I played the move that Paul played, which is also the best move in the position, queen b3. And now you might wonder here if Paul is breaking these opening rules, and he is. In fact, he's moved the queen twice in the opening, and one of the opening principles is never to move the same piece twice in the opening. But of course, that should always be followed with the phrase, unless there's a reason not to. And in this case, there's a good reason for this move. It makes a double threat. You're threatening on f7 and you're threatening on b7. It wins material, and you don't fall behind in development because black has to respond to these threats. So your development is just fine. So that's why this is a good move here. And the best move here is the move that the Count and the Duke played way back in the 1850s. I think it was 1858 it was played. They played queen to e7 with the idea that if white grabs on b7, then the queen to b4 check will force a trade of queens. And then black would play on a pawn down, but at least it would be a long game and there might be chances. So Morphy wasn't having any of that. He ignored that pawn, which was just hanging there, and developed his knight with knight to c3. And they responded with c6 to keep the knight from hopping into these squares, a very logical response. And the game continued from there. So the Duke and the Count were not bad players. They're actually were playing pretty well, but Paul was just better. That's the only way to say it. So an interesting game ensued from there, worth taking a look at. So my opponent played here, instead of playing queen e7, he played queen to d7, putting the queen on this square. Also defending here, but no longer with this idea of queen to b4 check. That's no longer in the position. So right now I can take that pawn, and I should. I didn't. I was still playing like Morphy. So anyway, queen takes b7. Should have been played here. It just wins the rook. It's funny that he can't play queen to queen to c6 is often an idea, because the knight defends the queen defends the rook, and threatens to trade. But right here, unfortunately for black, white has the reply bishop to b5, pinning, not that way, pinning the queen to the king and just winning. So that would not work out. So queen takes b7. Also, bishop takes f7 check could have been played here, and could have been played in the Morphy game as well. The idea is you sack the bishop over here, and then you take on b7, and you've pulled the queen away where it has no hope of defending the rook. So in fact, you win the rook again. You give up the bishop over here, but you win the rook. And black gets some activity with bishop c5. That's funny. Queen c8 check looks pretty deadly here too. But you can also just grab the rook in the corner and go on to win. Anyway, I didn't play that way. I played, like I said, somewhat under the influence of Morphy. I played the way he did. I just kept developing. And this keeps the lead. But, well, queen takes b7 would have just won the game immediately there. So I really should have played that. And now black here should follow the lead of the Duke and the Count and play c6 to keep my knight from jumping into these squares here. But instead he played b6, a very strange move. And, well, now I start making some good moves here. I keep developing, put this bishop on an active square, and he goes bishop e7, blocking the pin. And now, yeah, problem with this is that it left the f7 pawn undefended. But it's difficult for black to come up with a good move here. Yeah, the engine is suggesting a6 or c6, grabbing control of the b5 square. Notice that if the knight comes out, another natural looking developing move, you can pin it with bishop to b5, and it's really an awkward pin. This b6 move really didn't make much sense. It weakened that c6 square, and so black's in trouble in that line as well. Anyway, he played bishop e7, and now I can take here with check. The king ran to f8, the better choice, and then now I just started trading things down. I basically have a winning position here. Bishop takes, he took with the pawn, and then I just retreated my bishop to e6. I want to get it out of trouble so my queen isn't always tied up defending the bishop. His queen dropped back to e8. Cancel that, went to e8. And then I castled the queen side, developing my rook onto an active file here. So let's see, is that one of the top engine choices? Yeah, it is one of the top choices. But castling either way is good. But it's a little more accurate, I think, to castle queenside here, just because of the open nature of the position and the fact that you're going for active piece play. So he goes knight c6 here, finally getting a piece out. I went bishop to d7. Yeah, it's unfortunate. He still has trouble finding any way to develop his pieces. And knight c6 is even one of the choices there, but it looks like it loses material. But knight a6 is probably a better deployment. Still a little bit of trouble for black. He's still losing. Okay, but knight c6 runs into this fork. He goes knight d4, attacking the queen. Okay, so this is another example of the rule of two. There's the idea is I'm attacking his queen and his knight. He wants to move his knight with an attack on my queen. And there's two ways that he can do it. He can attack from the d5 square, or he can attack from the a4 square. And knight to a5 is clearly the better move here, because I can't take the knight and I'm forced to move my queen, or take his queen, and we get that queen trade. But he's escaped losing more material, so that's the way to play it. When he plays knight to d4, he puts the knight on a square where it can be taken, and I can just grab it. So anyway, when you're in a tactical situation like that, remember the rule of two. There's two ways for that knight to attack the queen, and pick the best one. So he picked the worst one. He played knight to d4, and I can just take the knight off. And of course my rook is hanging, but his queen is hanging, and the rook is still defending the bishop. So he can either move the queen or take the rook, but in either case he will lose material. In the case of moving the queen, he loses the knight that I just took, and in case of taking the rook, he's going to lose the queen. He can get a rook and a knight for the queen, but he started out a piece down, so yeah, he's just down material. Anyway, he chose queen h5, relatively the best choice, and get my rook out of take, rook to d3, he goes rook to d8, and I think there's no more interesting moments after this. It's just kind of mopping up. I just pile up my pieces on the d file. Let's see, he interrupts the defense of the bishop, so I drop back to f5, takes on h2. These pawns don't matter so much, but I don't know. I mean, I could have played a move like rook to g3 here, cutting his king off. But knight to b5. The engine likes this. I'm trying to crash through on the b file. He goes king to g7, running away, hopefully to a safer location. And now I just took the bishop off. I'm winning another pawn here. But, well, once again, with this king on the g file, I can play rook g3 with check. Probably definitely a better choice. Anyway, I took here. He takes back. I grab the extra pawn. And we just get a situation where a lot of material comes off, and I'm just going to win the endgame with the extra piece. So not such a fancy win as with Morphy. I could already play queen here, check, and trade queens and go into this endgame. But let's see, I went rook d7 check. He went king h6. And then I went queen e3 check. King h5. I was looking for a mate, but I never saw it. So eventually I just gave up and went for the queen trade. But rook to g7. Rook to g7 is winning. Okay. You know, you have the feeling sometimes there's this winning blow. But, well, if you can win simply, you don't have to waste a lot of time looking for these moves. Let's check out rook g7. This is a rook sacrifice. So say the queen takes the rook. Then queen h3 check. And where can the king go? These are all covered. And the bishop covers, g6 there. So he's got to go to g5. Then the queen can come into g4 check. And king only has h6, and then queen h4 mate is winning. So that's a nice little zigzag mate. So the queen went like this here, and then here to deliver the mate to the king on h6. So nice maneuver there. Okay, I didn't spot that idea. I just went for the simple queen trade, queen h3 check. Takes, and then he resigned at this point. I mean, the same number of pawns on the board. It's just an endgame where I have an extra piece, and probably pick up some pawns too. So, not too hard to win that game from this point. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.